Alphas are naturally repelled by each other, but I'd been hopelessly in love with Calvin, another alpha, for years. Then came a sudden family crisis. I threw money at the problem to help him through it, and while he was vulnerable, I added a condition, forcing him into a marriage alliance with me. A dream I'd long yearned for finally came true, but even though I had reached up and plucked the moon from the sky, I never dared to touch it. Yet the man I saw as that untouchable moon, Calvin, ripped off his mask the moment he found out I'd sought comfort from a highly compatible Omega due to my pheromone imbalance. He chained me in a room with a cold glint in his eyes. "You like Omegas? Then how about I try turning you into my Omega? Would you like that?" 1. At exactly midnight, the phone on the table lit up, displaying a reminder. It was our wedding anniversary. I rolled the dice, casually turned off the screen, and slipped the phone back into my pocket. A faint scent drifted toward me, snapping me back to the present. A pretty, well-behaved Omega was holding a wine glass to my lips. I quickly realized I'd lost the round and had to drink as a penalty. I took the drink from his hand and tipped it back, subtly turning my head to avoid his next move. Just then, the door to the private room swung open. I looked up. The person who entered stood tall and elegant, smiling as he greeted the birthday guest. The shifting lights highlighted his flawless profile, so dazzling it was almost unfair. It was Calvin, my husband, in name, at least, whom I hadn't seen in days. He had always been the center of attention, even as a child, even during his lowest moments. There had been no shortage of people eager to lend a hand. All things considered, I'd gotten a pretty good deal. While talking to someone, his gaze seemed to flick past the crowd and land in my direction, though most of it lingered on the Omega sitting beside me. That glance stung. I snapped back to attention and leaned forward a little to block the Omega from view. In the 2 years we'd been married, we'd maintained a silent understanding. Our relationship existed in name only. We stayed out of each other's lives. I could tolerate his polite distance toward me. What I couldn't stand was him treating others with special warmth. 2. Calvin had been out of town on a business trip recently. According to his schedule, he wasn't supposed to return to City A until tomorrow afternoon. So why had he suddenly rushed back in a frenzy tonight? Before I could figure it out, the door opened again. "Sorry, flight was delayed. I'm late." I turned toward the voice and saw a familiar figure. My mind went blank, and my hand froze mid-reach for my drink. So that's why a workaholic like Calvin would suddenly change his plans and hurry back. Today was the day his first love, Damon, returned to the country. Damon instantly became the center of attention, standing beside Calvin and surrounded by people. The stunning, talented Omega had shed his youthful awkwardness and was now even more refined. The two of them, Damon and Calvin, with only half of Calvin's face visible, looked like the perfect match. They sat down together across the room. I looked away and downed my second drink of the night. The Omega beside me eagerly leaned in to refill my glass. That's when I finally took a good look at him. Soft chestnut hair, a delicate and charming face. His every move radiated a hint of eager to please, though not obsequious. Definitely more likable than an alpha. "You seem to really like tonight's Omega." "Ha!" Someone who clearly didn't know the nature of my relationship with Calvin teased me with a smile. The comment wasn't loud, but it caught several people's attention. I took a sip of wine and answered coolly, "He's attentive. Knows when to step in." "There you go with that job interview tone again." My friend chuckled. "Is he here to apply for a job with you or something?" I just smiled without responding, and the topic quickly changed. As I scanned the room, I accidentally locked eyes with Calvin, his gaze utterly calm. For some reason, my heart skipped a beat. 3. After the party ended, Calvin left side by side with Damon. Of course they had a lot to catch up on, old flames reunited after years apart. I gave a self-deprecating smile and walked off in the opposite direction, steps a little unsteady. The Omega from earlier trailed after me, hesitant but persistent. I stopped and made it clear I had no further interest in him. He should have taken the hint and left, but instead, he suddenly found a little courage and clung on. I'm very obedient in other ways too. I was slightly tipsy, so it took me a moment to grasp the meaning behind his words. My brow furrowed, and just as I was about to turn him down again, Calvin appeared from around the corner. His expression was calm, but his voice carried a sharp edge. "What? Planning to stay the night?" The faint thrill I'd felt at seeing him come back vanished in an instant at his cold tone. I shook my head. "No." "Then let's go. It's hard to find a driver at this hour." "Go with him." I was stunned for a second and blurted out the question in my mind. "What about Damon?" Calvin frowned slightly, seeming confused by the question, but answered honestly, "I already had a driver take him home." Right, that made sense. With his moral standards, he probably couldn't bring himself to cheat, not even emotionally, but still. You're driving yourself, didn't you drink? I didn't. Then he added, with a strange smile, there's no one around to drink with me tonight. That smile knocked my thoughts off balance. I felt even dizzier than before. Without overthinking, I followed him out of the club. The moment I got in the car, I was enveloped by his familiar scent. Maybe it was the alcohol, but for once, I allowed myself to indulge in it just a little. Do you remember what today is? Calvin suddenly asked. I assumed he was checking how drunk I was, so I answered absent-mindedly, Oscar's birthday. As soon as the words left my mouth, the pheromones in the air sharpened. The tension hit me like a jolt. Was this him trying to rub Damon's return in my face? Just as I was about to ask, Calvin turned slightly away, making it clear he didn't want to talk. A dull ache spread in my chest. For some reason, the notification I saw earlier popped back into my mind. Today was actually our second wedding anniversary. If you counted from midnight, right now. 5. We didn't speak the entire way home. Once back at the house, we each went into our separate rooms. Because of our different schedules, and also the natural repulsion between alpha pheromones, I had suggested separate bedrooms after we got married. Calvin had just stared at me quietly for a moment, then accepted the idea without a word. For the past 2 years, although we lived under the same roof, we were more like neighbors who barely acknowledged each other. After washing up, I had just laid down when someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Calvin, dressed in loungewear, holding a bowl. The hallway lighting softly illuminated him, casting a rare warmth over his usually cold demeanor. I made you some hangover soup. Drink it or you'll wake up with a headache. The person in front of me felt like a figure from a dream, and his gentle words had an almost spell-like effect. I reached out and took the bowl, dazed. Teach, thank you. Calvin smiled again. Aren't you going to drink it while it's hot? Oh, right. I snapped out of it and obediently downed the soup, taking back the empty bowl. Calvin glanced at me with a faint smile and murmured, "Good boy." That offhand comment knocked all the thoughts out of my head. By the time I recovered, he was already gone. He even treated a nominal spouse with such tenderness and care. I lay back in bed, comparing his kindness to my own selfish actions, feeling both ashamed and tormented. But before I could dwell on it further, my vision blurred, and I slowly drifted off to sleep. 6. In that haze between sleep and waking, I dreamt of the past. Back in high school, Calvin had been a top student with striking looks. No matter where he went, he was always the center of attention. I had always been second place, constantly compared to him by our parents. Over time, I started noticing him more and more, my gaze subconsciously drawn to his every move. After so long of looking up to him, I eventually became one of the many who quietly admired him. By then, we had both already differentiated. I knew there could never be a future between two alphas. Not to mention, he had Damon. They were perfectly matched in every way: background, interests, looks. People even said their pheromone compatibility was sky-high. They were the textbook definition of a perfect couple. So I kept my distance, watching him from afar, never daring to cross a line. After graduation, the little contact we had disappeared entirely. When we met again, the golden boy had fallen from grace, and his once beloved partner was nowhere to be found. Some people mocked him, others offered help. I was undoubtedly the most shameless among the latter. Using the excuse of financial aid to his family, I cornered him into marrying me out of gratitude, a deviant who liked their own kind, dragging him down into the same pit. Pathetic and despicable. 7. Still lost in those thoughts, I suddenly felt someone lift my blanket. The figure leaned in close to the crook of my neck, as if smelling my scent. Their warm breath tickled the side of my neck, making me squirm uncomfortably. A firm grip closed around my wrist, followed by a light bite, gentle, yet with a hint of warning. That familiar scent filled the air. It was definitely an alpha's pheromone, yet instead of resisting it, I felt my head spinning. Instinctively, I gave in to him. His touches were teasing, like he was playing with something delicate. He left me breathless and aching, yet strangely content. A soft sound escaped me before I realized it. Sensing the change in my body, he chuckled softly, so sensitive to my touch. Are you sure you're really into omegas? It was a ridiculous and vivid dream, but because the person in it was him, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. 8. When I finally woke up, I rubbed my aching temples and grabbed my phone. It was already 11 a.m. The internal clock I'd maintained since I was a teenager had inexplicably failed me today. After a quick wash, I headed downstairs to make myself something to eat. As I reached the staircase, I spotted Calvin in the living room, adjusting the strap of his wristwatch. I blinked slowly, trying to determine whether this was real or not. Sensing my gaze, Calvin looked up. "You're awake." Caught off guard, I nervously tugged at the hem of my sleep shirt. "Yeah." That brief exchange brought the silence right back. "I've got something to take care of later, so I'll be heading out." Calvin spoke again. The joy I'd felt at seeing him still at home began to fade. Of course, we were never going to celebrate something like a wedding anniversary, but even just spending time in the same house on a day like this felt like a small victory to me. Yet my hopes always seemed to fall short. I wanted to stop him, but what reason did I have? What right? So all I could say was a dry, "Okay." Watching him walk away, I forced myself to suppress the sour ache rising in my chest. Don't get greedy, don't expect anything, I reminded myself again and again. 9. I lost my appetite, and I wasn't the type to go back to bed. I just sat on the couch, dazed and motionless. The dizziness from earlier started creeping back. Soon, I felt flushed all over. I was definitely running a high fever. Because of my severe pheromone imbalance, fevers like this had become routine. I took 2 pills I had on hand, but they didn't work as usual. After downing 3 times the normal dose and still seeing no improvement, I called my friend, who also happened to be my doctor. He rushed over and found me passed out in the living room, then took me straight to the hospital. 10. I had no idea how long it was before I woke up again. As soon as I opened my eyes, Hugo leaned over to feel my forehead. The memory of collapsing came flooding back, and I whispered my thanks. "You took that many pills and still managed to call me. I'm impressed." He snorted. "Next time, just call the funeral home directly. Save us both the trouble." I gave him a weak smile. "Maybe you could recommend one for me." He shot me a look. "Don't joke. If you keep ignoring this condition, I can't promise you'll make it past 30. I mentally did the math. At this rate, I probably wouldn't even make it to 30. Our fake marriage might not last that long either. Maybe that's not a bad thing, I said lightly. At least it'll hurt 2 years less. Hugo's expression darkened. He grabbed my collar, his teeth clenched. "What the hell is wrong with you?" After yelling, he straightened up and asked, out of nowhere, "Bruno, I heard Damon's back in town." My throat tightened. "Yeah." He paused, then continued slowly, "If those two end up getting back together, please, think about yourself for once, okay?" Even my closest friend believed they'd get back together. A dull ache bloomed in my chest. I forced myself to stay calm and look down, letting him continue. "I know I'm just Hugo to you, nothing special. I'm not someone worth holding on to, but I'm begging you, at least try to care about yourself a little, will you?" I dropped the smile I'd been forcing and let out a sigh. "Hugo, you've been my best friend for years. Don't ever say you're nothing special." We sat in silence for a while, and finally, I gave in. "All right, I'll try your treatment plan. After all, you have to be alive to do anything else." Seeing Hugo's genuine relief light up his face, I started to think, maybe this was the right decision. 11. As if worried I'd change my mind, Hugo quickly set up a meeting with an Omega who had a high compatibility match with me. The Omega walked with a gentle, elegant step, slim like bamboo, with calm, soft features and eyes that curved slightly upward, carrying a faint smile as if in light conversation. When he got closer, he introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Marco." He carried himself with quiet confidence, a polished presence that hinted at time spent in a position of power. I appraised him without showing it and replied, "Nice to meet you." Clearly, someone like this wouldn't agree to treatment just for money. Having a stranger know about my private condition, my eye twitched. This was going to be a huge headache. I glanced sideways at Hugo. He seemed to understand my concern and nervously cleared his throat. "Let's just start with the tests." After a simple screening, we moved on to discuss the treatment plan. The treatment was broad but mainly involved receiving calming omega pheromones, including, but not limited to, hugging, kissing, even marking. Marco smiled faintly. "I'm fine with whatever you need." I smiled back lightly. "No marking, just simple physical contact for the treatment will do. As for payment," I tapped my glass, "you can just be straightforward." I didn't like beating around the bush. Damon's back in town. Marco wasn't shy either. "He wants to use you to secure his place in the family so he won't get kicked out." That's when I remembered. Marco seemed to be Damon's stepbrother, his nominal older brother. I'd heard the brothers didn't get along, so it made sense why he'd be concerned. Damon had latched onto Calvin like glue, and now his brother was after me. How interesting. I lowered my gaze and sipped my tea, agreeing silently. After finalizing everything, I drove Marco home before heading back myself. 12. By the time I got home, it was almost midnight. I wasn't sure if Calvin was back yet, but thinking about his usual routine. I slowed down my pace. I slipped on slippers quietly and crept inside, turning on the living room light. I froze at the sight before me. The person I'd been thinking about was slouched against the sofa, still in his day clothes. The scene overlapped with the daylight one, except now it was night, as if he'd never left. There was one difference. At his feet lay a large bouquet of roses. They were no longer fresh, some already wilting slightly, probably delivered hours ago. I stopped, silently making a mental note. He glanced sideways at me and asked, "You're home?" I nodded, forcing myself to ignore the suggestive roses, and answered as briefly as usual, "Yeah, I'm heading upstairs." But my mind kept wondering who he had seen today. Was it Song Hwai? Afraid I'd lose my composure, I hurried upstairs, wanting to get away from here. "I'm curious, what kind of job keeps you out this late on a weekend?" Calvin asked unusually. I couldn't ignore the question, but I wouldn't admit I'd been to the hospital today. So I said, "Not work. I had a meeting with a friend." He stood and leaned in slightly, as if trying to smell something. After a while, he asked, "An important friend?" His behavior felt off today, but I nodded along anyway. Calvin chuckled lightly, a flash of annoyance crossing his eyes. Without another word, he turned and strode upstairs, suppressing my confusion. I followed back to my room. While asleep, the strange dream from last night returned, only this time, his actions were harsher, with a hint of punishment. "You're covered in the scent of a strange Omega. I'd like to know when you got such an important friend." 13. When I woke again, a quiet message was pinned at the top of my chat list. "On a business trip, back in 3 days." Such a formal report. Anyone unaware might think we were just colleagues. Honestly, our relationship wasn't much closer than that. Lately, Calvin's been busier than ever, with business trips increasing sharply. The last time we met was at a friend's birthday party, our first meeting in almost a month. Reading the message again, I suddenly wondered, was he working this hard just to get away from me? When the company was on the brink of collapse, my funding and partnership kept it barely afloat. Now, just 2 years under Calvin's control, it was showing signs of regaining its former glory. This money-driven relationship was probably nearing its end. Just then, Hugo sent me a screenshot from Damon's social media. "Came whining to uncle and auntie, said Calvin used to squeeze me, but now he's behaving." The photo showed Damon dining happily with family. The table was laden with dishes I'd never been served. When we first got married, Calvin had politely brought me home once, though his parents didn't openly show it. I could sense their dislike. As we left, I accidentally overheard his mother asking Calvin if he planned to divorce me. Calvin calmly answered, "I'll think about it once the company stabilizes." That's good. That day, I ran away in defeat. Since then, whenever holidays came, I always used being busy as an excuse not to go to his home. 14. Pulling myself back to the present, I looked down at the photo on my phone. The people in the picture were laughing and chatting warmly together. Even Calvin, who usually treated me coldly, had a faint smile on his face. Hugo followed with a message. "Just a heads up, they've met each other's families. These two might be getting back together soon. You better cut your losses." Cut my losses? I always felt like I was the one pushing too hard. But maybe cutting my losses was the smarter choice. Seeing the happy group in the photo, after 2 years of marriage, it was the first time I actually thought about divorce. I used to want to drag it out until Calvin was the one who asked for a divorce. Now, I wanted to keep some dignity for myself. I'm not one to procrastinate. With that thought, I immediately hired a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement. That afternoon, I sent the digital copy to Calvin. I had a lawyer draw up a divorce agreement. Please review it. And if you have any additional conditions, just let me know. If there are no issues, I'll send you the paper copy. Please find time to sign it. I spent the whole day forcing myself to stay strong. After sending the message, I collapsed wearily onto the bed, waiting for his reply. But hours passed with no response. He was probably busy with his new flame and didn't have time to reply. 15. I turned off my phone, planning to go to bed. But just then, my heat cycle hit, fast and fierce. I messaged Hugo, asking him to arrange treatment earlier. Then, forcing myself up, I threw on some clothes and rushed out. Hugo acted quickly and soon had someone scheduled. Honestly, I really shouldn't have gone out in this state, but I didn't want to bring anyone into my home. Hugo couldn't argue with me and finally gave in, warning me to control myself, to avoid any trouble on the way. The treatment was set near my place. Even so, when I arrived, both of them had clearly been waiting for a while. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Enough of the apologies. Are you about to die or what?" Hugo steadied me, He quickly gave me an injection to suppress symptoms, while Marco silently released calming pheromones. Hugo hesitated, then said, "If it gets too bad, just have some contact, don't tough it out." I nodded. After Hugo finished his instructions, he left the room without looking back. I fought hard to suppress my alpha instincts reacting to such a high compatibility Omega. Seeing this, Marco said softly, "I'm okay with a temporary marking." I shook my head. "No need." He smiled knowingly. "You're quite proper." I admit, at this point, I didn't want to touch Marco because of Calvin, but that was just out of respect for my spouse. As for Marco himself, I doubted he cared much either way. I closed my eyes and didn't reply. About half an hour later, my pheromones gradually stabilized. Hugo grumbled while going over the final precautions, then left without looking back. I put on my suppression bracelet and headed out. Just downstairs, I saw Marco waiting by the curb. He had left with Hugo earlier. "Something you need?" I kept walking. Marco smiled lightly. "I wanted to discuss payment." "What do you need me to do?" "There's a banquet next week. They want you to attend as my partner." "Next week?" By then, Calvin would probably have read the divorce papers. By then, our marriage should be officially over. Thinking that, I nodded and agreed. Marco thanked me and got into a car to leave. It was just a short distance to my place, so I walked home. The cool evening breeze brushed my face, easing the summer heat, but not the dull ache in my heart. Near my doorstep, I suddenly stopped. The person who occupied all my thoughts was standing right in front of me. 16. Calvin said nothing, just stared at me intently. My heart skipped a beat. "What are you doing here? Am I not allowed to be here?" Calvin shot back coldly. "Or maybe you should explain why you're covered in Omega pheromones." Out of nowhere, Damon appeared, smirking like he was watching a show. Calvin glanced sideways at him, his face darkening. Damon stifled his grin and came up to me, calling out, "Sister-in-law." His words stopped mid-sentence as his expression suddenly changed. "The pheromones on you." He must have recognized his brother's scent. My palms started sweating. I didn't know how to explain. Should I confess my illness? "Marco." Before I could decide, Damon spoke quietly, his calm voice barely hiding a storm of anger. Calvin stepped forward and blocked me. "Mind your own people." Damon spat the words with hatred and turned away. I was confused and didn't know what was going on, but it was obvious Damon was going after Marco. Marco was here to help me with treatment. There was no way I'd let him bear Damon's unexplained rage. I tried to stop Damon but Calvin pulled me back hard. "You can barely take care of yourself, and you have time to worry about others?" Once inside, Calvin pushed me down onto the bed. He looked down on me from above. The pale light cast shadows under his eyes, revealing a faint darkness. An inexplicable chill ran through me, and I instinctively shrank back. But then Calvin snapped. He grabbed my ankle and dragged me back. "How dare you bring up divorce?" He leaned in close, overwhelming me with his pheromones. My head spun uncontrollably. "Wait." I raised a hand to stop him. Don't come near me." My illness had just eased. I couldn't handle this kind of stimulus. Calvin pinned me to the bed again, muffled my mouth with something, and whispered through gritted teeth, "You go behind my back to see an Omega, but won't let me touch you. If you couldn't accept an Alpha, why did you come to me in the first place? You like Omegas. Ha. Then I'll try my best to make you my Omega. Okay." 17. I was awakened by thirst. My head ached like it would split, and the glands in the back of my neck burned and swelled. I instinctively reached up and touched them, flinching from the sharp pain. I forced myself up, searching for the culprit. Suddenly, the sound of leather shoes tapping on wooden floors echoed through the empty room, step after step, like a relentless knock on my heart, making it tremble wildly with fear. The sound approached deliberately, like teasing prey trapped in a cage. Calvin came to the bedside. Gone was the coldness from last night. Instead, he gently brought a cup of water to my lips with a warm smile. "Thirsty? Here, let me feed you." "No, I can do it myself." My voice was hoarse as I instinctively refused. Calvin's eyes darkened as he avoided my hand. "I said I'll feed you." This time, he didn't wait for me to drink but forcibly pressed the cup to my lips, pouring water in. I swallowed too slowly. Water dripped down my chin, soaking a large patch of my shirt. What a waste. The words hit me like a memory from last night. My face instantly flushed with heat. Before I could catch my breath, he grabbed my hair and forced my head back. He bit my lower lip hard, almost drawing blood, then quickly let go. I groaned in pain and pushed him away angrily. Calvin paused, sat upright, and returned to his usual calm demeanor. "Last night, I lost control. Alphas shouldn't break the rules and force themselves. My dry throat was soothed by the water, and I rasped, "What? I agreed to your divorce." Calvin looked down at me like delivering a verdict. After last night, he was certain alphas naturally repel each other, and he calmly prepared to leave. Feeling empty inside, I trembled but spoke firmly, "Fine, don't forget to sign." He wasn't leaving because he liked Damon. The unbridgeable divide between us was being alphas. I had no strength to fix it, nor the desire. Let it end here. Though I knew this clearly in my heart, I still didn't dare look up as I watched his back as he left. 18. The expected sound of the door closing didn't come. I looked up, and tears unexpectedly slid down my cheeks. Calvin cupped my face, his cool fingertips gently brushing my swollen eyelids. "Why are you crying?" I barely got the word out before the phone rang. The screen showed Hugo calling. I propped myself up to reach for it, but Calvin snatched the phone first. I grew anxious. Hugo must have called me so many times last night. If I don't answer, he'll worry. Calvin glanced down at me, saying matter-of-factly, "I'll contact him for you." No, worried that Hugo might tell Calvin about my illness. I tried to stop him, but my feet were chained, so all I could do was watch as Calvin took my phone and walked out. Only then did I realize, at some point, a collar with an iron chain had been fastened around my ankle, and the other end was chained to the bed frame. No wonder he didn't leave after I brought up divorce. From the start, he wanted to keep me tied to him. But, why? My body was already exhausted from last night. I'd only just been forcing myself to stay conscious. Just as I was about to lose consciousness again, Calvin hurried back in, his usually flawless face pale. He unlocked the shackle around my ankle, lifted me up in his arms, and strode out. I nestled into his embrace, my head swimming. Before losing consciousness, it felt like a few hot drops fell on my face. 19. My pheromone disorder is congenital. This means my lifetime partner can only be an omega with a high compatibility match, or a beta without pheromones. Since I didn't have a partner before, this illness stayed dormant, unnoticed by me, until it erupted on my wedding night with Calvin. After the hospital checkup, I asked Calvin to sleep separately. This illness means I can't even tolerate a low-match omega, let alone an alpha. I'd thought about divorce, but the company had just received funding. It wasn't the time for upheaval. Besides, I had trapped Calvin to me by shameful means and felt too lowly to have feelings beyond propriety toward him. So, in our first year of marriage, things stayed peaceful. The turning point came in the second year. My symptoms worsened inexplicably. At the time, we couldn't find a cause. After I regained clarity, Hugo told me the truth. Calvin had used pheromones to disrupt me, which worsened my condition. Only then did I vaguely understand those strange dreams I'd had. They had really happened. You helped him out of kindness, but he nearly killed you. Hugo angrily cursed beside me. What kind of person is he? I listened quietly. I can't fully blame Calvin. He didn't know about my illness then. But right or wrong, there's no one left to argue with. Since that day, Calvin vanished. I asked everyone but couldn't find him. 20. The day before the banquet, I called Marco. The phone rang for a long time before he answered. I got straight to the point, telling him I couldn't pretend to be his partner at the banquet anymore. Okay. Marco's voice was broken and hoarse. Be good. A strong male voice cut in, and the call ended. I set down my phone, rubbed my forehead, and avoided thinking about what had happened between Marco and Damon. A month later, returning from a hospital checkup, I found Calvin at my doorstep after days of absence. He gripped my wrist. "We need to talk." Once inside, I asked, "About what? How's your illness?" His eyes looked dull. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were sick. Can you forgive me? It's stable now." I lowered my gaze. "It wasn't all your fault. I didn't tell you about my illness." "Then you," his eyes brightened. "But you're right. Two alphas shouldn't be together against nature." I interrupted. "Now that you're back, just sign the divorce papers." He sounded desperate. "I was just angry then. I never wanted to leave you. But isn't it the truth? You can't do this to me." His eyes reddened, his voice trembled. "You can't abandon me." I stayed silent. "As long as this illness exists, we can never truly love. Better to cut it off completely now." Tears fell, and he bent down to wipe them. Following his movement, I noticed a bandage wrapped around his neck. "Why the bandage?" I reached out to touch it. Calvin startled and stepped back, but spoke plainly. "Nothing, just had a gland removed." His words struck me like thunder. I shivered and asked, "Why? Why did you do that? Was it to be with me? Paying such a heavy price just to stay with me?" That's when I realized how much he loved me. But Calvin acted as if nothing happened, abruptly changing the subject. "Can we not divorce?" "Yes, Clearly surprised, I agreed. He paused. You're not just agreeing because I had a gland removed, right? It's my decision. You don't have to take the blame. If you still resent me, don't force yourself. Calvin unusually rambled on. I smiled through tears. It's not that. Not because of the surgery, but because he loves me. That, I agreed. Because I love you. Those 3 words spanned my youth and finally came from me. You, Calvin stammered, unsure how to begin. Usually composed. Now he was like a shy teenager in love, pitifully asking, "You're not lying to me, right?" The roles reversed. He became the one seeking love. I nodded. He was so happy he couldn't contain himself. 21. Calvin's perspective. Marrying Bruno and the financial trouble in my family both happened when I was off guard. Honestly, at first I didn't recognize him. I didn't know why an alpha like him wanted to marry me. I looked into his eyes and calmly asked why he wanted to do this. He explained the pros and cons clearly, then added, "Consider it a favor between old schoolmates." Only then did I remember, he was the top student right behind me in high school, a brilliant bookworm who looked good but focused only on studying. There were better partners available, but when I saw the sincere look in his eyes as he said that, I nodded almost against my will. I regretted it later. How could I agree to marry another alpha in such a daze? But after marrying, I never planned to neglect my marital duties, even on our wedding night, when I dressed formally yet felt my ears flush red for the first time in over 20 years. That night, when I tried to go further, I suddenly ran a high fever, my lips pale. I rushed him to the hospital and stayed by his side till dawn. At midnight, my assistant called urgently. Seeing he'd stabilized and knowing his attending doctor was a close friend, I entrusted him to others and rushed to the company. After handling company affairs that day, I returned home only to be met with his cold face and a declaration that he wanted to sleep separately. I thought he was just not used to married life yet and agreed, but from then on, his attitude toward me grew distant. At first, I was frustrated but consoled myself, better this way, so we wouldn't have trouble divorcing if feelings developed. But the seed of feeling I buried then quietly took root and grew in my heart. Each time I saw him, it grew stronger. A man who rarely falls in love only needs once for it to be engraved in his heart. I didn't know where to start, so I worked hard to equalize our relationship, just hoping he'd face me honestly. My desires grew day by day beneath my calm surface, but he remained oblivious. My emotional illness worsened in this relationship. It was still manageable until I caught him drinking wine given by a stranger, Omega, then it spiraled out of control. He started it. I have to face whatever consequences come.